Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari So today we are reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is. We are reading the third chapter, verse number 12. So before we begin, we would just like to chant some invocation mantras to bestow upon us auspiciousness. So if you could all please repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So we are reading from chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita, verse number 12. So I'll recite the Sanskrit, and if anyone feels inspired to, they can repeat. Ishtan Bhogan Hivo Deva Dasyante Yagya Bhavita Teddattana Pradayaibhyo Yo Bhunkte Stena Evasa. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods being satisfied by the performance of yajna, sacrifice, will supply all necessities to you. But he who enjoys such gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. Purport. The demigods are authorized supplying agents on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Therefore, they must be satisfied by the performance of prescribed yajnas. In the Vedas, there are different kinds of yajnas prescribed for different kinds of demigods, but all are ultimately offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For one who cannot understand what the Personality of Godhead is, sacrifice to the demigods is recommended. According to the different material qualities of the person concerned, different types of yajnas are recommended in the Vedas. Worship of different demigods is also on the same basis, namely according to different qualities. For example, the meat eaters are recommended to worship the goddess Kali, the ghastly form of material nature, and before the goddess, the sacrifice of animals is recommended. But for those who are in the mode of goodness, the transcendental worship of Vishnu is recommended. But ultimately, all yagyas are meant for gradual promotion to the transcendental position. For ordinary men, at least 5 yagyas, known as Pancha Maha Yagya, are necessary. One should know, however, that all necessities of life that the human society requires are supplied by the demigod agents of the Lord. No one can manufacture anything. Take, for example, all the eatables of human society. These eatables include grains, fruits, vegetables, milk, sugar, etc. For the persons in the mode of goodness, and also eatables for the non vegetarians, like meats, none of which can be manufactured by men. Then again, take for example heat, light, water, air, etc., which are also necessities of life. None of them can be manufactured by human society. Without the Supreme Lord, there can be no profuse sunlight, moonlight, rainfall, breeze, without which no one can live. Obviously, our life is dependent on supplies from the Lord. Even for our manufacturing enterprises, we require so many raw materials like metal, sulfur, mercury, manganese, and so many essentials, all of which are supplied by the agents of the Lord, with the purpose that we should make proper use of them to keep ourselves fit and healthy for the purpose of self realization, leading to the ultimate goal of life, namely liberation from the material struggle of existence. This aim of life is attained by the performance of yagyas. If we forget the purpose of human life and simply take supplies from the agents of the Lord for sense gratification and become more and more entangled in material existence, which is not the purpose of creation, certainly we become thieves. And therefore we are punished by the laws of material nature. A society of thieves can never be happy because they have no aim in life. The gross materialist thieves have no ultimate goal of life. They are simply directed to sense gratification, nor do they have knowledge of how to perform yagyas. Lord Chaitanya, however, inaugurated the easiest performance of yagya, namely the Sankirtan Yagya, which can be performed by anyone in the world who accepts the principles of Krishna consciousness. So before we begin, we'll just chant a Mangala Charan to invoke auspiciousness and request the blessings of all the previous teachers. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So before we begin, we'd just like to request the blessings of Srila Prabhupada. Would like to request the blessings of their lordships, Sri Sri Radha Gokulananda, Sri Sri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman, Sri Sri Gaur Nitai. Like to request the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas so that I may be able to speak something of value and according to the scriptures. So here, the verse is talking about necessities of life, the natural gifts that are given to humankind for our sustenance. And these are, it's described in the verse, essential for our being. For us to live, for us to sustain our body, it's certain things are imperative, like, for example, food. Food is an essential item, and if we don't get food, we don't live. We can't live. We can't sustain our body, and without food, we will most likely die. And therefore, food is essential. Food is imperative. Now, food, where does food come from? Food comes from, as was mentioned in the purport, grains, fruits, nuts, milk, etc., etc. Now, one may try to find out the source of how have these grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts come into being. So if we analyze this minutely, we can trace back that the sun was required. The sun was required in order for the plants to grow, in order for the grains to manifest, in order for the fruits to flourish. Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda ki jai, Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman ki jai, Shri Shri Gauranitai ki jai. And therefore, one may give great credit to the sunlight for providing heat and light. This heat and light allows the vegetables, fruits, plants to be nourished. And when these vegetables, plants, and fruits are nourished, they are able to provide food for the human beings. And by such food, we are able to sustain our bodies. Therefore, undoubtedly, we are in debt. We are in debt to the sun. This is a natural gift that is given to mankind. And this is the kind of necessities of life that are described. Another necessity of life that is described is water. For example, we cannot live without water. Water is an essential item that that is required for our being. Without water, no one can live. Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita that all these elements are actually uh, part of his energy. Krishna says, Bhumi rapo nalo vayu kham mano buddhire vacha ahankaramiti yamme binna prakritir ashtada. And therefore this verse describes that earth, water, fire, air, ether are all Krishna's energies. And therefore one can conclude that ultimately the Supreme Lord is bestowing upon human society and the earth and all living entities adequate necessities of life through these elements like earth, water, fire, air, ether. So this Prabhupada is described in the purport. He mentions that ultimately in the Vedas there are different kinds of yagyas described for different kinds of demigods, but all are ultimately offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what Prabhupada is saying here is that ultimately there is one provider. There is one person who is ultimately providing everything required for our being. And that provider is the Supreme Lord Krishna. Now comes the question that what is the role of demigods? Sometimes it can be confusing because there are many demigods, and it can be perplexing that what is the purpose of having so many demigods, uh, and what do we do with such information? Do we have to individually worship every single demigod? Why do some people worship one demigod and not the other? And this is explained here. Prabhupada mentions according to the different material qualities of the person, different types of yagyas are recommended. So different types of worship are recommended for different types of people. But all types of sacrifices and worship are ultimately meant to lead one to self-realization. So this is actually a very important point because this point describes why there are different methods, one can say, of spiritual life according to the Vedic literatures. Because not everyone is at the same point in their spiritual life. Some people may be at a different point and therefore they may need something else. Like, for example, when a child is studying at school, they're studying mathematics, they may use a small calculator, basic calculator, which has the 10 digits and the times plus minus the 4 operations. A simple basic calculator. A person who is more advanced in their studies, perhaps GCSEs, then they may use a scientific calculator which has functions of trigonometry, sine, cos, tan, etc. So this is an example where different things are used, but ultimately they're meant for to lead us to one goal. The purpose of that calculator is so that the student can perform operations so that they can advance in their studies. And that is the same purpose of the scientific calculator also. But essentially they are two different things. And so there may be different types of worship according to the Vedic literatures, but they are all meant to bring us to the point of self-realization. They are all meant to lead us on further in our journey in spiritual life. And therefore, spiritual life is very individual and unique. What is good for one person may not be the best thing for another person. It's like medicine. When we get prescribed medicine, then it says on the leaflet, this medicine's like prescribed for you. Don't share it with others, even though they may have the same symptoms, because uh, it may be something different. One has to be diagnosed by a doctor. One has to be diagnosed by a doctor. And therefore, this explains why we have different processes for different individuals with different qualities. But here Prabhupada is mentioning that when different kinds of offerings are done, they ultimately are offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, the position of demigods in the Supreme Personality of Godhead is like uh, is described or explained by the following example. You may, in a government, you may have a prime minister, and the prime minister is the head of the government. Underneath the prime minister, there may be many heads of departments who oversee different departments. And the demigods are like the different department heads, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is like the prime minister. And therefore, the demigods are described here as supplying agents. They are also working for the Supreme Lord. They are working for Him in the sense of maintaining or creating and providing for His creation. His creation. In the Bhagavad Gita, many times it is emphasized by Krishna that He is the cause of all that be. In chapter 10, verse 8, he says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo matta sarvam pravartate iti matta abhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. He says that from me emanate all material and spiritual worlds. And Krishna then also goes on to describe that he is the Supreme Lord. He says, Matta parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya mai sarvamidam prottam sutre maniganaiva, that there is no truth superior than Krishna. And therefore, according to the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, when we worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then all other uh, items of worship are automatically included. Now, how is this so? The example is given that this verse appears in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto. Yatha tarora mula nishechanena tripyanti tan skanda bhujopashaka pranopahara cha yathendriyanam sarvarhanam achyuteja tathaiva sarvarhanam achyuteja. That just as by watering the root of a tree, automatically all the branches, leaves, twigs, flowers, leaves are all automatically nourished. When you water the root of the tree, you don't have to individually water each leaf. You don't have to individually water each twig, branch, flower, fruit. Simply by watering the root of the tree, one automatically nourishes the entire plant, the entire leaves. In the same way, by going to the Prime Minister, if you go directly to the Prime Minister, you don't have to go to the individual department heads, because the Prime Minister has the overall say. He has the final say. He has the final authority. And therefore, when we approach Krishna, then there is no necessity of approaching various other demigods. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter, he says, Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mukshayishyami masuchaha.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna
He
Krishna,
says,
Hare Hare.
abandon all
Hare
varieties
Rama,
of religion and just
Rama
surrender unto
Rama,
me.
Hare Hare.
I shall
Hare
deliver
Krishna,
you from all sinful
Krishna Krishna,
reactions.
Hare
Do
Hare.
not
Hare
fear.
Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare
And therefore,
Krishna, Krishna
Krishna
Krishna, Hare Hare.
is recommended
Hare
that we is recommending
Rama,
that we
Rama, Hare
approach
Hare.
him
Hare
directly. We approach him
Krishna,
directly.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
So now
Hare
one may
Rama,
ask, why do
Rama
people
Rama, Hare
approach
Hare.
demigods then if
Hare
Krishna is recommending that we worship
Krishna
him?
Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare
The reason is, as I
Rama,
was
Rama,
mentioning
Hare
before,
Hare. Hare
that
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama,
it depends on the
Rama, Hare
qualities of
Hare.
the person concerned. Prabhupada
Krishna
mentions in the
Krishna, Hare
purport,
Hare.
for one who
Hare
cannot understand what the
Rama, Hare
personality of
Hare.
Godhead
Hare
is, sacrifice to
Krishna,
the
Krishna
demigods
Krishna,
is
Hare Hare.
recommended.
Hare
According to the different material
Hare Hare.
qualities of the
Krishna,
persons
Krishna Krishna,
concerned,
Hare Hare.
different types
Hare
of yagyas are recommended in the
Rama,
Vedas.
Hare Hare.
Therefore, we understand that according to one's
Krishna
quality,
Krishna,
different
Hare
things will
Hare.
be recommended
Hare
in the Vedic
Rama,
literatures. And
Rama,
therefore, we
Hare
have to
Hare.
know what
Hare
is our quality, what
Krishna
is it that
Krishna,
we
Hare Hare.
want,
Hare
and then we can approach
Rama,
accordingly.
Hare Hare.
Approach
Hare
accordingly.
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare
But Krishna is recommending that we
Rama,
abandon all
Hare Hare.
varieties of
Hare
religion and just surrender into
Krishna,
Him.
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare
The other
Rama,
example given
Hare Hare. Hare
is that
Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
when
Hare
we
Hare. Hare
uh, put
Rama,
food
Hare
in the
Hare.
stomach, when we
Hare
eat food and it
Krishna,
goes into the
Krishna
stomach,
Krishna, Hare
then the
Hare.
entire body
Hare
is nourished. We don't
Rama, Hare
individually or
Hare.
independently have
Hare
to try to nourish our
Krishna Krishna,
fingers,
Hare Hare. Hare
legs, feet, face independently.
Rama, Hare
Simply
Hare.
by nourishing or and putting food into the mouth through the stomach, all other limbs of the body are automatically nourished. And therefore, when we satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then all his other authorized supplying agents are also automatically satisfied.
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama,
This
Rama
verse
Rama,
also
Hare Hare.
describes how
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
these
Hare.
gifts
Hare
undoubtedly are given to us, but we should not
Rama, Hare
misuse
Hare.
these gifts.
Hare
The gifts
Krishna,
given of
Krishna Krishna, Hare
sunlight,
Hare. Hare
heat,
Rama,
rainfall,
Rama, Hare
all of
Hare.
which without
Hare
our
Krishna,
existence would,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
our bodily
Hare
existence would cease to be,
Rama, Rama
uh,
Rama, Hare Hare.
imperative
Hare
for our life. We should not take it for
Krishna
granted.
Krishna, Hare
We
Hare.
should
Hare
acknowledge that these are gifts,
Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
and
Hare
therefore we should
Krishna
acknowledge who is
Krishna,
the
Hare Hare.
provider of such gifts,
Hare
who is the one who is giving
Rama
such
Rama,
gifts,
Hare
where is it
Hare.
coming from.
Hare
That is what is
Krishna
being
Krishna
recommended in
Krishna, Hare
this
Hare.
verse,
Hare
because it says that he who enjoys
Rama, Hare
gifts,
Hare.
such gifts,
Hare
without
Krishna
offering them to the
Krishna
demigods,
Krishna, Hare
in
Hare.
return is
Hare
certainly a thief.
Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare
So we
Hare.
should make proper
Hare
use of these gifts. We should make proper use.
Rama,
And
Hare Hare. Hare
how do we properly
Krishna
use
Krishna
these
Krishna,
gifts of
Hare Hare.
sunlight,
Hare
uh, water,
Rama,
rainfall?
Rama, Hare
How do
Hare.
we properly
Hare
utilize this? These
Krishna
can be
Krishna Krishna,
utilized
Hare Hare.
for advancement in self realization.
Rama,
Advancement in
Hare
self
Hare.
realization means that
Krishna
understanding who are
Krishna,
we
Hare
and
Hare.
what is our purpose
Hare
here. Because ultimately, this life is meant for self realization.
Krishna Krishna, Hare
This
Hare.
human
Hare
form of life, which
Rama,
is
Hare
very
Hare.
special,
Hare
is not always the
Krishna
case.
Krishna Krishna,
We are
Hare Hare.
individual spiritual
Hare
souls, as Krishna describes earlier in
Rama,
the Bhagavad
Rama,
Gita
Hare
in
Hare.
chapter 2.
Hare
We are individual spirit souls
Krishna, Hare Hare.
transmigrating through various
Hare
types of
Hare
body. Krishna says that
Rama,
the
Hare
same
Hare.
way that
Hare
we take off clothes at the end of a day
Krishna
after
Krishna,
they're
Hare
dirty
Hare.
and we put on new
Hare
clothes at the beginning of the day, the same
Rama, Hare
way
Hare.
when this
Hare
body is old,
Krishna
tired,
Krishna
and
Krishna,
no
Hare
longer
Hare. Hare
functioning to its
Rama,
capacity,
Hare Hare.
then we give up
Hare
this body and we take on a new, fresh
Krishna
body.
Krishna, Hare
But
Hare.
it's not necessary
Hare
that this body will be of a
Rama,
human body.
Rama,
And so,
Hare
the
Hare.
importance
Hare
of a human body is
Krishna
that
Krishna Krishna, Hare
a
Hare.
human can
Hare
question. A human
Rama,
can
Rama
question and
Rama, Hare
inquire
Hare.
and use
Hare
their intelligence to
Krishna
ask,
Krishna
why
Krishna, Hare
is this
Hare.
happening?
Hare
Uh,
Rama,
Whereas if we look at many other species of life, they do not have such intelligence to be able to ask questions, to be able to ask why. Like if we ask a dog,
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare,
why are you
Hare
barking?
Rama Hare Rama
What will
Rama
he
Rama
respond?
Hare Hare,
He will
Hare
only bark
Krishna
more,
Krishna
if that.
Krishna Hare Hare,
So we see
Hare
that
Rama
other
Hare Rama
species of
Rama
life do not
Rama
have
Hare Hare,
this
Hare Krishna
intelligence. And
Krishna
that is what
Krishna
is
Hare
special
Hare,
about the human
Hare
form of
Rama
life.
Hare Rama
And
Rama
therefore,
Rama Hare Hare, Hare
the
Krishna
correct way or the proper way of
Krishna Krishna
utilizing
Hare
these
Hare,
natural
Hare
gifts that are
Rama
given to
Hare
us
Rama
is to
Rama
utilize
Rama
them
Hare Hare,
for the
Hare
advancement of
Krishna
self realization.
Krishna Krishna
Now,
Hare
self
Hare,
realization
Hare
means
Rama Hare
questioning,
Rama
questioning
Rama
why we
Rama
are
Hare
here
Hare,
and
Hare
who we
Krishna
are. The
Krishna
question
Krishna
is
Hare
of
Hare, Hare
identity.
Rama
If you
Rama
ask a
Rama
dog
Hare Hare, Hare
or a
Krishna
cow or any
Krishna
animal,
Krishna
who
Hare
are you?
Hare, Hare
What will
Rama
the cow say? The cow will just go moo,
Hare Krishna
and the dog will just bark.
Krishna
The cat
Hare
will go
Hare,
meow.
Hare
But the
Rama
human being, the human
Rama
being will be
Rama
able to
Hare
say,
Hare,
he
Hare
will be able
Krishna
to answer,
Krishna
I am
Krishna
such and
Hare
such, I
Hare,
am from here and
Hare
here, like that.
Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna
Therefore,
Krishna
Prabhupada
Hare
also
Hare,
mentions that
Hare Rama
we
Rama
should make
Rama
proper
Hare
use
Hare,
of them to
Hare
keep ourselves fit and healthy for the
Krishna Hare
purpose
Hare,
of self
Hare
realization,
Rama
leading to the
Rama
ultimate
Rama
goal
Hare
of
Hare,
life,
Hare
namely
Krishna
liberation from
Krishna
the
Krishna
material
Hare Hare,
struggle of
Hare
existence.
Rama
Now, how does self realization lead to liberation
Krishna
from the
Krishna Hare
material
Hare,
struggle
Hare
for
Rama
existence?
Rama Rama Hare Hare,
First of
Hare
all, we have to understand what is the struggle of
Krishna Krishna
existence.
Hare Hare,
The struggle
Hare
of existence, Krishna
Rama
describes
Rama
in the,
Rama Hare Hare, Hare
I think it's
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare,
13th chapter,
Hare Rama Rama
between the
Rama
verses
Hare
8 and
Hare,
12.
Hare
Krishna says,
Krishna Krishna
Janma,
Hare Hare,
Mrityu,
Hare
Jara,
Rama
Vyadi, Dukkha, Doshanudarshanam.
Hare Hare, Hare
Birth, death, old age,
Krishna
disease.
Hare Hare,
These
Hare
are cause of
Rama
suffering.
Rama Hare Hare,
Put your
Hare
hand up if you've taken birth.
Krishna Hare Hare,
No,
Hare
no one took birth?
Rama Rama
Okay,
Hare
so I'm
Hare,
gonna assume
Hare
everyone has, otherwise we wouldn't be here.
Krishna Hare Hare,
Put your hands up if you've ever been ill.
Rama Hare Hare,
Most people have been ill. Illness is
Krishna Hare Hare,
almost
Hare
inevitable. Put your
Rama
hands up if you think that one day you will die.
Krishna Hare Hare,
So that's pretty much everyone. And put your hands up if you think one day you will become old.
Krishna Hare Hare, Hare
Okay, so I think it's fair to say, and please someone do shout and correct me if I'm wrong, that everyone will go through these four things: birth, death, old age, and disease. Now, this is described as a great cause of suffering. This is described as a great cause of suffering. Illness, we can see how it's suffering. That is very simple. We just have to cast our mind back a couple years to COVID, and then no further explanation required, I hope. Birth is distressful. Birth is distressful because the living entity is being put into a condition which is not natural. The living entity is being put into a condition which is temporary, because ultimately, where there is birth, there will be death. And so the living entity will only remain there for a certain period of time. Specifically speaking, the living entity itself never dies. No jayate mriyate va kadachin, Krishna says, there is no birth, no death for the living entity. But the body dies. But because the spirit soul is engaged within the body, he experiences the happiness and distresses. And this birth and death is a cause of distress, because what we experience here we cannot keep. What we obtain here, what we possess, we cannot keep. Although it may feel good for some period of time, and of course this feeling, or this nice feeling, is worthy of acknowledgement, but nonetheless it is also noteworthy that how long will it last? Will it be there forever? And if not, why? Because if, and Krishna describes that the living entity is eternal. So if an eternal being has something that will ultimately end, then it cannot remain satisfied, it cannot remain peaceful. it cannot remain content, because ultimately at one point things will go away. For example, if you have a car, you may have a car today, you may have a car tomorrow, you may have the same car 10 years later, but at one point or another, that car will go. And if that car doesn't go, you will go. But one of you will go. So the idea is, because the spirit soul is eternal, our occupation or our sense of pleasure should also be eternal, because that's what matches. Only then will we be satisfied. So, when one becomes free from this cycle of birth and death, that is called liberation. And that basically means that one becomes free from this material struggle. And that is really the purpose of life. So I think we'll conclude here. If anyone has any questions, comments, corrections, or anything they would like to raise, please feel free to do so.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
So I'll just
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama.
So I'll just end by saying, by quoting Prabhupada in the last paragraph. Lord Chaitanya, however, inaugurated the easiest performance of yajna, namely the Sankirtan yajna, which can be performed by anyone in the world who accepts the principles of Krishna consciousness. Traditionally, Vedic sacrifices, which is being recommended here, are very difficult to perform. They require large amounts of grain, ghee, and a kind of a sacrificial arena. A lot of resources and wealth is also required, and a lot of time is required. Also, what is required is qualified priests who are able to perform such sacrifices. Many of these things are actually difficult to obtain or even unavailable in today's present day and age and society. Therefore, what is being recommended is Sankirtan Yajna. Sankirtan Yajna means the sacrifice of chanting the holy name of the Lord. This chanting process is the process of awakening our natural dormant relationship with the Supreme Lord. This chanting is very easy to do, and anyone can do it. Simply by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, we can awaken ourselves to self-realization. We can understand what our identity is. Uh, the first thing that happens when we start chanting is Cheto Darpana Marjanam, that the mirror of the mind is gradually cleansed. At this present moment, there are so many unwanted things within our mind and heart, and we are trying to purify ourselves. And this purification can happen by the chanting of the holy name. This chanting of the holy name is so powerful that anyone, anywhere can perform it. No strict. There are no hard and fast rules. There are no hard and fast rules. And therefore, this chanting is very much encouraged. It is actually mentioned in the Vedic literatures that in this age, chanting is the only way. Hare Nam eva kevalam, kalo naste vanaste vanaste vagate ranyatha, that there is no other way than chanting of the holy name. Chanting of the holy name is the prime process by which we can uh, come to this point of self-realization, which is being mentioned in this verse. So I think we'll conclude here. Thank you very much for your kind attention. If there are any questions, or if not, there will be Gora Arti happening at 7 o'clock. So please do try to stay for that. After Gora Arti, there will be some Mahaprasadam being served just outside the temple room in the reception area. So please do take some Mahaprasadam. The Arti we will be singing Gora Arti. The lyrics are there on the board. And thank you very much for coming to Bhaktivedanta Manor, and we hope to see you again soon. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama.
I don't mind. Okay, I'll do it. You sure? I don't mind. You can sing Nation Guardian. You do this and I'll do Nation Guardian, yeah?
श्री श्री राधा गोकुल नंद की जयो जयो गोरा चंदे रे आरती को शोभा जयो जयो गोरा चंदे रे आरती को शोभा जानावी कातावाने जग मन लोभा जानावी तातावाने जग मन लोभा सखी निताय चा भामे गदधारा निकाते अद्वैताशीनी कसा चक्रधारा निकाते अद्वैताशीनी वसा चक्रधारा बोसी जते गोरसा रत्न सिंहासने Bosi Yate Gorachan Ratna Simbasane Arati Korena Brahma Adi Devagane Arati Korena Brahma Adi Devagane Gaura Hari Bol. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschataya Deshatarine
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschataya
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschataya Deshatarine
Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschataya Deshatarine
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktivedanta
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna Krishna
Hare Krishna 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 Hare
Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Bolo.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare.
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. श्री राधा गोकुल नंद की हरे कृष्णा।
Hare Krishna, everyone. If you'd like to take a seat, we will now sing the Nishinga Arati prayer.
जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्रजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सदश्री श्रीमद His Divine Grace Abhay Charanarvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Stotra Sadashi Srimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur ki प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्णा गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की वृंदावन धाम की नवद्वीप धाम की जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की गंगा माई की यमुना माई की तुलसी देवी की भक्ति देवी की हरिनाम संकीर्तन की सामवेद भक्त वृंद की निताई गौर प्रेमानंदे All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to the lotus feet of Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste Narasimhaya. Hiranyakashipu vakshaha. Bahirna Simho Hridayena Simho. Nashimamadim Sharanam Prapati. Tava Kara Kamalavari Shinga Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Bringa Keshavadita Narari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hari Jai Jagadisha Hari Jai Jagadisha Shri Nishinga Bhagavan ki, Prahlad Maharaj ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bol.
Hare